Hi, class. This is lecture 22 for Econ 4001.02, and I'm your professor, John Raybeck. So this lecture is going to cover comparative statics of inputs. And for this, we're going to do just a simpler case, where there's only one input. So we're often interested in things like how do inputs change as prices change, whether this be output price or input price. And these objects are called comparative statics, right? So comparative statics are however something changes with another thing. And these are going to be easiest to look at with just a single input for the profit maximization problem here. So we're going to we're just going to look at single input profit maximization for this. Here, X is going to be a single input. And the profit maximization problem then looks like P times f of x minus wx, right? So this is the revenue you get minus the cost of the inputs. And here P is a positive output price and W is a strictly positive input price. So how are we going to do the input comparative statics? Well, first assume that the optimal input is a differentiable function given by this x star that depends on output price and input price. From the first order conditions, we have that P times the derivative of our production function evaluated at optimal input minus W is equal to 0. Here, if we want to look at the comparative static with respect to input price, we can just differentiate with respect to input price. But then we'll get P times the second derivative now of our production function times the change in x star with respect to input price minus 1 is equal to 0. But we can rearrange this then, and we'll actually get that the change in input with respect to the change in input price increasing is going to be negative. So as input price grows up, input goes down, and this is because f double prime at a maximum is going to be less than 0 strictly. And this is from second order conditions. And if you've forgotten second order conditions, I would recommend you go back to the optimization lecture to look at those. I believe this is lecture 4. So that's how we find input comparative statics with input price. We can also find input comparative static with output price. Again, we're going to assume that our optimal input function is differentiable. We can again look at our first order conditions at the optimal inputs. And now we'll differentiate instead with respect to output price P. And if we do that, we'll get this expression just using the product rule and chain rule. And rearranging then, we'll get that the change in input with respect to the change in output price is given by this, which is strictly positive, since again, the second derivative is going to be strictly less than 0 since in an optimum, and the production, or the first derivative of our production function will be strictly greater than 0 since these are monotonic increasing. So this shows that you can actually sign comparative statics for the profit maximization case, at least when there's only one input, and that this isn't too bad, right? So the general technique you want to get here is that you use this first order condition and then differentiate in order to try and find out information about comparative statics, right? So this is the general type of technique that you should be taking away from this lecture. Great, so this is a short lecture, and here we just discussed how to get some comparative statics with respect to inputs for the for the profit maximization problem. Great, thanks for listening and see you next time.